Um, uh, you know, the communities of Shomer Torah Synagogue and Temple Aliyah come together more and more frequently, and we get to celebrate the joys of Jewish life together. We get to celebrate the simchas of holidays, and what it means to be community is also when you really care for each other as you share moments of sadness too. Right? It's easy to share moments of joy. It's harder to open your hearts and to share the pain of loss. And Yom HaShoah is one of those moments of where we have determined that our communities belong together. That together there is a greater sense of memory. And that's what Yom HaShoah is about. Right? Literally the day of the Shoah, the day of mass destruction. I've come, last 2 days, just so you know, I've spoken numerous times to our religious school. I just finished a couple minutes ago. Why I wasn't Dominion, those of you who are there, was because I was speaking with our youth department about what's taking place. And I spoke about how I've come not to like the number 6 million. I don't like the number 6 million because it's too clean. Right? Like, how many people die? Like 6 million. Like, it flows so easily off the tongue, and we lose a sense of the import of the one individual, of the power of one. And the rabbinic tradition that says every individual, the loss of one life is like the loss of an entire world. And we lose that. And so I'm going to try and the most official number, by the way, somewhere about 5,933,900, and I'm going to add 1. 5,933,901. It's a little bit harder to say, isn't it? And it should be hard to say. It should be hard to fathom how many stadiums it takes to fill. And then you understand perhaps a small piece of what the tragedy is about, and even then we can't. And we begin to try and understand, because how could the most civilized society in the world at the time, Germany, the 1920s and 30s, how could that such enlightened place, right, the homeland, if you will, of psychology and the most brilliant minds of the time and the greatest arts of the world, how could a civilization turn to genocide? Right? Starts with one person in a beer hall in Bavaria, right, who tries a coup d'etat. By the way, a number of years ago, I'll share a personal story. I was actually at that Bavarian beer hall with a group of Southern California rabbis, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Reconstructionists. You're on an official trip to Germany from LA, and we went to that beer hall. We walked in with our kippot. We sat down. It was our way of having Hitler turning in his grave, wherever he should be buried. Yamach Shemo, as we say. His name should be erased. We're not going anywhere. We're going to claim our rights, but we do it through memory. And that's what tonight's about. And we're going to be focusing on anti-Semitism. We're focusing because no one could have imagined that just 3 days ago we'd be reminded again of what we were 6 months ago in Pittsburgh, of what hatred can do, and here in the heart of a 19-year-old. So to understand anti-Semitism, to understand what it can do, what it causes, and the dangers of it, that's the reason we've invited Matthew Friedman here. Right, Matt is the Senior Associate Regional Director. Is that the correct title? I want to make sure of the ADL of Los Angeles. He works in the Jewish community of Cleveland for 3 years at the Jewish Education. Now, you've been in your position 12 years? Is that about right? Right, 12 years. Prior to that, Jewish Education Center of Cleveland, Jewish Community Federation, Senior Associate Regional Director for ADL now. He works with, by the way, the community in terms of covering San Fernando Valley, northern Los Angeles, Kern County, oversees ADL's local advocacy and engagement work, which encompasses outreach to government agencies and elected officials. Matthew coordinates ADL's Holocaust education programs, including with Catholic institutions and educators. It's very important. He holds a bachelor's degree from Brandeis University, master's degree in education, and an MBA nonprofit from AJU. And we're going to begin tonight as we reflect on the Holocaust, Yom HaShoah, to reflect on anti-Semitism, its dangers, its reality. And Matt, if you'll please come forward.
Good evening. Do all these mics work so I can walk around and go to? Yeah. All right. So just, I did put a few materials out in the hallway. So I'll mention a few of them this evening as we're going through the program, but please feel free to grab them on your way out. A lot of them are also on our website. So I tried not to kill too many trees by printing out a lot of things. So again, most of the stuff out there is on our website. So again, thank you, Rabbi Vogel. Thank you to both congregations that are here today. I spoke 2 years ago, actually, I think, to the men's group here at Aliyah right before Passover. And I've spoken at Shomrei Torah several times over the years. And I actually taught religious school at Shomrei Torah about 12 years ago, right when I was starting at ADL. And I taught there for maybe 4 or 5 years when I first moved to LA in the religious school. So it's nice to be back here in the Valley. I'm sure most of you are familiar with ADL, but I'm just going to give you a very brief overview, and then we'll talk about anti-Semitism today. And we actually have some very new reports and new numbers that just came out this week that I'm going to share with you, talk about some local incidents, what has been happening, and then before we wrap up, we'll also talk about what you can do as members of the community to respond to anti-Semitism when you hear about it, when you experience it yourselves. So ADL, as most of you probably know, was founded in 1913. So we've been around for 106 years now. We were founded in Chicago by members of a B'nai B'rith chapter there. And our mission since then until today has remained the same, which is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. Just as they understood over 100 years ago and today that we can't just be about ourselves as a community, that we need to work for the betterment of all of our society and fight and speak out against bigotry and discrimination for everyone. And that's what we've been doing since then. So that's the important part of our dual mission. We have offices all over the country. Our headquarters is in New York City. In California, we have 5 regional offices. So I'm from the Los Angeles office. And we cover LA County, the Inland Empire, and Kern County. We have office in Orange County. We have an office in San Diego. We have an office in Santa Barbara, and we have an office as well in San Francisco. So the state of California is pretty well covered when it comes to ADL offices. So basically, our work, if we were to break it down, we could say it really falls into sort of 3 different silos. We would say we have our investigative work, our work to protect the community, and our education work. So what do I mean when I mention that type of work? So our investigation, we have a center on extremism. So we have various investigative researchers that are based throughout the country. We have someone who's based here in LA, and they each focus on different phenomena when you're talking about extremism. We have people and staff members who are focused on right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism, single-issue extremist, Islamist extremism as well. We have speakers of multiple languages, so we're not just looking at speakers of English. So we have all these different people. We have anti-government extremist experts as well, who they have areas of focus and they work together, and they go out there and they investigate. So they are looking a lot online. As you might imagine, a lot of extremist activity has moved online in the last few decades. So looking online every day, monitoring the extremist website, monitoring what extremists are doing on other websites, including the same websites that you're using. They're looking at chat rooms and getting really deep into what these people are doing and what the rhetoric that they're using is. We also do a lot of security work about protecting Jewish institutions. We do security seminars every year. We also work with Secure Communities Network nationally, SCAN, who also does a lot of this work on Jewish communal security. We've been partnering with them for the last few years. We're probably doing the most as far as a nonprofit organization in working with law enforcement around the country. And so we are giving them information and intelligence when it comes to us. We are providing training to law enforcement on hate crimes, extremism, terrorism, all sorts of areas that they are of interest. We also wrote the model hate crime laws, which are in 45 states and the District of Columbia. Utah most recently made their laws more inclusive, which is a good thing. So California, fortunately, we have very good hate crime laws, very comprehensive. Most the categories that we would want to be covered are covered, and at the federal level as well. And then the education work that we do is most notable through our A World of Difference Institute. So we understand that people are not born hating. It is a learned behavior, and it can also be unlearned. And we also believe that you can be inoculated against hate if you get to kids early enough. So to that end, we've been doing work as young as preschool. Most of our work now is focused on the elementary, middle school, and high school age students, where we're going to schools, we're doing in-depth programs with their teachers, with the administrators, with the students, training students to then train other students. We don't typically do big assembly programs. We try to go in there and do something a little bit more in-depth, a little more impactful. So that's something that we do all over the country, including in Los Angeles, and unfortunately, we've never been busier. So that's sort of an overview of the type of work that ADL does, and there's more things that you can ask me about if you're interested, and as we get to the end of the presentation and if you have questions. So now I'd just kind of like to give you an overview of anti-Semitism today. I would be remiss, obviously, if I didn't mention what happened over the weekend outside of San Diego at Chabad of Poway. Sadly, we lost one life, and several others were injured. Could have been worse. We also have 6 months before that, we had the shooting in Pittsburgh. So I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, so we're situated between Pittsburgh and Cleveland, if any of you are familiar from that area. So my family knows people that knew some of the people that were killed in Pittsburgh that were neighbors growing up in that Squirrel Hill community. So the connections in the Jewish communities, those degrees of separations are very tight. And it's scary. I'll be honest, it's very scary for me. I've been doing this 12 years, and something feels different to me with the rhetoric that we're seeing and the attacks that we've been seeing. And obviously, they're not just on the Jewish community. We've had attacks on houses of worship in Sri Lanka, in New Zealand. We had attacks on churches here in the U.S. as well, African-American churches. So this is something that sadly keeps happening and keeps happening. And, we can do what we can and educate people and work with our government and work with law enforcement. But, unfortunately, it probably will happen again. But that's just, unfortunately, the reality. So this is, just to give you a little bit more background, this is our definition of anti-Semitism. So different groups, different scholars might have a different definition. This is what we use. So it's prejudice or discrimination directed towards Jews based on stereotypes and myths, and often invokes the belief that Jews have extraordinary influence with which they conspire to harm or control society. It can target Jews as individuals, or as a group, as a people, or the state of Israel as a Jewish entity. So we also have some more information just about anti-Zionism, sometimes criticism of Israel or Zionism when it uses certain stereotypes and rhetoric can cross the line from just legitimate criticism to anti-Semitism. So we are also concerned about that as well. So we just came out with a report yesterday. I don't know if any of you saw it in the news. There's some articles about it in the LA Times and the LA Daily News, tracking our anti-Semitic incidents. So ADL has been tracking anti-Semitic incidents since 1979 and compiling data. So what do I mean by an anti-Semitic incident? So that's inclusive of hate crimes. So if someone commits a crime against person or property because they believe that person or property is Jewish or Jewish-owned, so that's encompassing that, but it's also including non-criminal activity, non-criminal behavior. So it could be epithets, name-calling, something that would not necessarily be a crime. It's free speech, but it's also hate speech. So we count those all together. And this is only sort of an audit of what is reported to us and what we hear about through the news, through social media, through law enforcement and government contacts. So this is not inclusive of everything that happens every year that's anti-Semitic. If we don't know about it, we can't necessarily include it. But this is 2018. So 2018, we saw 1,879 anti-Semitic incidents throughout the U.S. Last year was the second highest we'd had since we started tracking these numbers. We had almost 2,000. So the good news is that we saw a 5% decrease from 2017 to 2018. The bad news is that it's still very, very high, very elevated. You can see it was going down for a couple years. 2016, there was a big jump, and then large jumps in the last 2 years. So what is causing this? You know, there are a lot of different causes. We can talk about the political rhetoric we've been seeing, just sort of the polarization that we've seen in the U.S., the normalizing of certain discourse that was not seen to be publicly things you could talk about. So these are problems, and people using social media and to meet up and to connect with like-minded folks. So this is the reality that we're seeing. I hope next year our numbers will be down, but this is everything. So to break it down a little bit more, so we saw in 2018 we had 1,066 instances of harassment, which could include criminal harassment but also non-criminal speech. We've had vandalism against Jewish targets, which would be property, people's homes, Jewish institutions, Jewish-owned businesses, and we had 39 instances of assault. And we try to mirror the FBI crime statistics, so they count, for example, of the 39 instances of assault, which is we're using to include murder in this case, being encompassing that term, we're including the attack on the synagogue in Pittsburgh as one instance of assault. It's not 11 or 13 if you include those injured. So according to police and law enforcement, they would count that as one. So we also count that as one instance of assault, just to give you that context. So just to give you that sense, we have the numbers in 2017 as well, which we had less assault in 2017 than we did in 2018, and that's the 2016 numbers. A lot of what we're seeing in the last few years has been anti-Semitic incidents on K through 12 schools, at non-Jewish K through 12 schools. So that's public schools as well as private schools that are not necessarily Jewish. In 2018, we had a total of 344 incidents that were reported to us, and this is all across the country. We had quite a few more in 2017, so it's good in some respects that is going down. I think our school communities, many of them, not all of them, but some of them are trying to be more reactive and proactive as well in educating their students and using our resources or other organizations' resources to try to get ahead of this. But it's still a major problem. We're seeing this at schools in this area. There was a school in Venice that was just vandalized a day or so ago with swastikas and some anti-Jewish graffiti. So this is in our own school districts and our own community as well. And we are seeing incidents on college campuses. Obviously included in these incidents are a lot of the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist activity that we're seeing, but it's also including a lot of traditional neo-Nazi right-wing white supremacist propaganda too. We have seen a tremendous increase in the last few years of white supremacists, not just sort of targeting Jewish people or other minorities on campuses, but trying to recruit people on campuses with posters and flyers, having meetings, and rather sophisticated ways. So in 2018, we saw 201 incidents on campus, which was down from 204 in 2017. And we saw a big jump from 2016 to 2017. So it was about level from year to year. And again, these are just what is reported to us. So these are some examples, just to give you some context, of some of the types of flyers that we have been seeing. I mentioned some of the white supremacist propaganda. So these are all by Daily Stormer, which is a white supremacist website. You can see, again, when we had the Kavanaugh hearings in the fall, blaming Jews for any criticism of Kavanaugh. This was Back to Israel Jews. This is in the middle, right? This is a very notorious anti-Semitic character that's been around for about 20 years or so. And then this is kind of blaming Jews for banning of Alex Jones, the talk show host, or he has a web, so he's online as well. So kind of blaming Jews for impeding his free speech. So when we talk about attacks on Jewish institutions, we had 265 in 2018 versus 200 and, so we had 265 in 2018, and it was a 23% decrease from 2017. But obviously Jewish institutions were a large target of the attacks and vandalism and so forth that we had last year. We also had a lot of robocalls that were targeting Jewish institutions in 2018. And not just Jewish institutions, members of the community. We got calls from people who were like, why am I getting these calls? Maybe some of you received some of them. Maybe they were received here at the temple, or so we don't know. If people reach out and let us know about it, but a lot of them were from the campaign of Patrick Little, who ran for Senate in California. He did not make it to the runoff, but he was a white supremacist candidate, right? He's still active out there with a lot of anti-Semitic and racist rhetoric, but there were people making calls on his behalf that were very anti-Semitic and very ominous and shook up a lot of people. And of course, we had the shooting in 2018 in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue. So you can see what month to month we can track the numbers and see when there were spikes. So we saw the anti-Semitic robocall campaigns that were happening about a year ago, late April, early May. And then it kind of went down again. We had a big white supremacist flying a ring campaign around the country. We had the shooting, the murders in Pittsburgh, midterm elections, then it went down slightly towards the end of the year, just to give you, again, that sense of what the year looked like. So here in California, while we were down 5% nationally, California actually was up 27% from 2017 to 2018. So in 2017, we had 268 incidents total. 2018, that increased to 341. So that's from all the offices of ADL collecting them together. And you can see the breakdown. We had the majority, again, were harassment, could be speech as well, and including, then we had 88 incidents of vandalism, which was slightly down from the year before, but a lot more harassment. And we had 9 assaults in 2018 that were reported to us versus 0 the year before. So again, just to give you that context locally. And that's the whole state. I don't have the numbers just for this region. So in terms of modern day anti-Semitic activity, obviously we've been seeing a lot of that activity, and the shootings are obviously first and foremost on our mind. But what is some of the rhetoric we're seeing, and where are we seeing it? So we are seeing, again, anti-Semitism on the far left, on the far right. Here you can see a cartoon kind of talking about Representative Ilhan Omar. Back at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of people talking about some of the things she was using to describe not just Israel, but describe American Jews' support for Israel, and accusing basically American Jews both of having dual loyalties and members of Congress only being interested in supporting Israel, she said it was all about the Benjamins, right? So the idea of Jewish influence, this sort of conspiracy theory coming up. So we saw that rhetoric and from people, and obviously the BDS movement we're obviously concerned about. Several years before she was elected to Congress in 2012, she tweeted that Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. So these things, they're a constant. You can see in some of her rhetoric from the last few years until she got elected as well. And we, obviously, if you don't follow ADL on Twitter, I would encourage you to do so. Our CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, tweeted quite a bit in response to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to. You know what? I'll just pick this up. There we go. How's that? Okay. Thank you. Is that better? Okay, great. All right. So some other examples of anti-Semitic rhetoric that we've been seeing. We saw this in Orange County, right? There was about a month or two ago. It was all over the web about some students at a local high school in Orange County who had a party. I think they called it Alcoholocaust. I'm not making that up. And they took pictures, and some of the students apparently were even Jewish. So just it just shows the ignorance of a lot of people. And I guarantee you these kids did learn about the Holocaust at some point. It's mandatory, usually in 10th grade in California. But whether or not they learned anything or they processed it, obviously that's not the case. So it shows the importance of Holocaust education and impactful Holocaust education, not just teaching facts or teaching the number 6 million, but more effective education. And our office in Orange County was handling that. We've also saw, this was just from a few days ago, we have this cartoon that was in the international edition of the New York Times, sort of invoking many anti-Semitic tropes, implying that the dog in this case, which is Netanyahu, kind of drawn in a sort of anti-Semitic character with the Star of David, is leading the blind President Trump, and for some reason they decided to put him in a yarmulke. So again, these tropes of Jewish control, these conspiracy theories that we are seeing, even in such mainstream newspapers like the New York Times. And so they rightfully apologized for it, but they certainly had a lot of criticism from us and others when this happened. We are seeing a lot of energized white supremacism, as you might expect. So what we are seeing today, and a lot of the rhetoric that we are seeing from anti-Semites, has to do with several ideas that have been around for several years, but they've really come up in their rhetoric quite a bit. So most white supremacists or white nationalists, or however they want to call themselves, believe that white people, white Anglo-Saxons, more or less, are an endangered species, right? That they believe that there is this effort, this conscious effort to get rid of white people, to replace white people in this country. So they call it replacement theory. You may recall when there were the marches in Charlottesville in August 2017. What were the people there saying? Jews will not replace us, right? They start out saying, you will not replace us, and then they start saying Jews will not replace us. They didn't literally mean that the Jewish community in this country is going to replace them, because we are small in numbers, and ultimately. What they believe is this idea of replacement theory, that Jews are engineering, it's a conspiracy theory, that Jews are engineering this way to bring in other people from other countries to ultimately replace whites as the people in power in this country, right? So Jews are behind immigration, whatever your views are on immigration. Jews are behind this push for diversity, or which they think is a bad thing, right? Or multiculturalism. So Jews are behind this. Therefore, when we had the shooter in Pittsburgh or the shooter outside of San Diego, right? When they were, the rhetoric that we saw from them echoes this. Similarly, the shooter in Christchurch, New Zealand, same rhetoric, right? So this is something that's become an international crisis. We're seeing it all over the world. So this is a word cloud that my colleagues did based on the social media of the shooter in Pittsburgh. So the way the word cloud works, if you've seen them before, the words in the middle that are larger are the words that come up more often in the person's writing. So when you analyze the Pittsburgh shooter, you can see that the words that come up the most in his social media posts were Jews, people, invaders, Jewish, Trump, nation, Christians, highest. One of his last posts he did was talking about HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, how they are trying to bring in more refugees and things like that. So again, whatever your views on that issue, they believe it is an existential threat against white people. Just today or yesterday, one of my colleagues did a similar word cloud from the shooter at the Chabad synagogue over the weekend. So you can see it's similar. It's a little harder to see. A lot of these words, I think we'll fix it up a little bit, but this was just done today. So European, race, Jews, people, Jew a little bit smaller, right? So it's all about blood. They're concerned about white blood and white purity, and the sort of the diversity happening in this country is a bad thing, and that Jews, again, are behind it. And that's why one of the reasons they are targeting Jews, why that is part of their philosophy. I mentioned some of the extremist propaganda already, but you can just see a few additional examples. So this was the propaganda distribution, so on campus, off campus in total. So from 2017 to 2018, we saw a huge jump in all propaganda of instances that were reported to us. We had a little over 400 that we were able to track in 2017, and we had a huge jump in 2018. And there wasn't as big of a jump on campus. What we had been seeing and what we were reporting on in 2017 was that on-campus propaganda. But then we saw this huge jump in off-campus in the past year. So when I'm talking about white supremacist propaganda, I'm not just talking about anti-Semitic. I'm talking about all racist extremist propaganda from these people. So some of it was not targeting Jews, and it would not necessarily be included, for example, in our numbers for the anti-Semitic incident, but we do keep track of it in other ways. And here are a few more examples of some images that we've collected. So just I want to make sure that I'm telling you exactly where these were and what these are. So on the left, these are all from 2018. So the one on the far left was not too far from here, a few miles from here on Ventura Boulevard on a Target, on the Target building that said Pure Hate 88. And some community members on their own decided to quickly erase it, which I commend them for that, but they were able to document it and they sent it to us. So this is not just like a random swastika. Sometimes you see random swastikas here or there, and a lot of times they're drawn wrong. This is clearly a racist statement, right? 88, when you see that number 88, it typically stands for the 8th letter of the alphabet, H. So 88 in this context for sure stands for HH, Hail Hitler. So that's a clear giveaway, and obviously pure hate, right? And so sometimes you might see the number 1488, right? Have you ever heard of that before? No? So 14 is a reference to 14 words, which is sort of a motto amongst white supremacists, and it stands for, we must secure the existence of our race and a future for white children. I got it, 14. So that's what so sometimes you will see 14 and 88 together, right? So 14 by itself, not necessarily a racist or anti-Semitic number, neither is 88. Well, with context, we can understand who is behind this. I already showed you this image, but we saw this one. This was posted on a synagogue here in LA on the east side. And this is Patrick Little, the person who ran for Senate, who was not, it wasn't necessarily him behind the robocalls, but people supporting him. That we saw about a year ago, and one of his followers. This is at, I think, Hollywood and Vine. He was, you can see the Walk of Fame, and this was here in LA, just, I believe that was in August. So he was holding this sign in broad daylight, and this is another sign that says, Heather O'Rourke, raped by Jews. Heather O'Rourke was the young girl who was in the Poltergeist movies, you might recall. So then some other images that we saw. This was also this past year. I believe this was over the summer. This was June at UCLA. This was posted, and this was posted at least one other place. It's basically just the Wikipedia entry for the Jewish ghetto police, but then the term Khazar and Nazi gangster Jew at the bottom. And then this was posted, I believe, by the Skirball Center and Stephen S. Wise Temple and AJU. Above the 405, it said America for Americans, the rest must go, bloodandsoil.org. Clearly, it is anti-immigrant, but Blood and Soil is an English translation of a Nazi slogan, Blut und Bogen, just to give you some additional context. And then I think some of you in this area may recognize the poster in the middle. This was found just down the street by El Camino Real Charter High School and Nestle Elementary and a few other schools in this area in the valley. I think we had about 4 different locations where this poster was found. That LAPD, 5, okay. Oh, we have 5 minutes? Oh, okay, sorry. So I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. We have an ADL heat map, skip it by hate crime laws. Okay, what are the ways that we can respond to anti-Semitism when we see it? So we have different types of anti-Semitic activity, hate crime, hate speech, anti-Israel activity, prejudice and bias, Holocaust denial. And how can we respond? You can contact law enforcement. You can reach out to elected officials in government. You can provide educational materials and advocate for students, educators, and families. You can connect with ADL and other Jewish advocacy organizations. Respond to community concerns as well. Use social media and traditional media. And use your own voice and encourage others to use theirs, right? So what does that mean? Law enforcement. So you want to create, as members of a community, as members of synagogues, proactive relationships with law enforcement and emergency personnel. So in case of LAPD, since I think most of us live here in LA, you should know, if you're at a synagogue, you should know your senior lead officer, right? When you see a hate crime, whether it's vandalism or criminal threats, et cetera, report them. Report them to LAPD, file a police report. And if you're unsure if something is necessarily criminal, you can still report it. They do keep track of, to some extent, hate incidents, which is non-criminal. So they will know if there's a lot of incidents in a particular area, then maybe they should be keeping a closer eye. In terms of government and elected officials, develop relationships with your local, state, federal elected officials. Reach out to them when things happen, before things happen, ask them to speak out when these things do happen. And they can assist you in mobilizing resources and advocate proactively for policies and legislation that will protect people and combat hate and discrimination. So meet with your city council members, meet with your assembly members, your state senators, and of course the congressional delegation, right? When things happen, there are education resources you can deploy, right? ADL has a lot of these resources. You can go to our website. In fact, I have some examples outside, and I'll show you an example of what you can talk about with students, what you can talk about with children, how to talk about these issues with them. And you can provide materials and model appropriate advocacy. And of course, I would not be here and if I didn't say that, of course, ADL is a resource when these things do happen. We stand with you. We stand with the community. We can act as advocates for you. We have connections with our local and state and federal electeds as well. And as you can see, we do track these incidents. We have relationships with law enforcement, as I'm sure some of you do as well. But please, please keep us in mind. Don't be shy about reaching out to us. If there's something that you would like us to do, if there's something we're not doing, if there's something you don't think we know about, let us know. That's the one thing I can communicate, just to keep you in mind. We can respond to community concerns about social media. When you hear about things, I would just say, just in general, right? You get something through email, you get something on Facebook, look at this. Just think a little bit more critically also at the same time when you're looking at it. Where is this from? Does this seem credible? Who sent this to you? Where did this originate from? And don't forward things needlessly. At the same time, when we see things, let people who can know about it, share it with them, but at the same time, don't try to just forward things unless you're sure that it's necessarily legitimate, right? So you can use social media to speak out about things, Facebook, Twitter, promote and retweet messages and posts from ADL, law enforcement, government, and media, and so forth. And I also want to point out we have something called the Cyber Safety Action Guide. I put out some pamphlets outside as well. So if you see something that's troublesome online, whether it's on Facebook or if it's on Twitter or Google, YouTube, regardless, you can go to our Cyber Safety Action Guide on our website, and it'll give you not just the terms of service or codes of conduct for these different websites, so you can see where someone broke it necessarily, but also guidelines on how to report offensive content or hateful content. So that is also a good resource that you can use. And speak out, use your own voice, and so forth. We have reports every day. There's usually a new report or blog entry on our website. You can see some examples. This just came out about 2 days ago, Discussing Anti-Semitism, a Guide for Reflection and Conversation. And then there's a PDF that goes along with it. This is a discussion guide that you can use with your children, with your grandchildren, if any of you are educators, with your students, about what is anti-Semitism, how do we respond to it, and so forth. So I put some examples out on the table in the hallway as well. Feel free to grab it. It's also on our website. You can download it there. If you do come across or experience an anti-Semitic incident or a hateful incident, regardless, we do keep track of non-anti-Semitic hate incidents as well. You can report them to ADL. We have a very clear form on our website, adl.org, report incident. You put in the date, you put in as much information as you know, and someone from ADL will get back to you. We have additional resources on our website about protecting your Jewish institution, empowering young people in the aftermath of hate. We have that in English and in Spanish. And you can just see some other examples of some of the reports that we put out in the last year or so. Okay, so I think that wraps me up, and we have time for questions now.
So we have time for just a couple of questions. I'm noticing, standing here, something that Rabbi Kamras observed while we were sitting there. The last couple of years, we've been doing a Yom HaShoah program for many years together. The last couple of years, the room was probably 1/3 as full as it is tonight. And as beautiful it is as that is to see, it's sad the reason why. So I want to allow time we're going to have time for about 3 questions. Yes, sir. Is it a question? Yes. Not a statement, but a question? All right.
How do you introduce diversity without being perceived as an invader?
That's an interesting question. I think if someone perceives you as an invader, that's problematic already. I think diversity really depends who you ask for what is diversity. But diversity to me means a diversity of views, a diversity of backgrounds. And unfortunately, some people think about it in a negative. I think about it as a positive. So when I try to talk about diversity, I try to emphasize the positive benefits of multiple voices and multiple experiences. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that's what we want to emphasize.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
You didn't speak much about anti-Semitism from the left. You did mention college problems with rallies and things like that. Can you embellish a little more about what sort of dangers we're facing from the left wing?
Okay. Well, I only had 30 minutes, so I could do a whole other hour if you want me to talk about anti-Semitism on the left. Look, what we are seeing as far as the left-wing anti-Semitism, as you probably are aware of, a lot of it is anti-Israel activity, BDS activity. That's what we're seeing a lot on campuses, but in other ways as well. I mean, ADL is ourselves, we are a target of some of this rhetoric. We are targeted by far left groups who criticize the work we do with law enforcement and say that we are bringing law enforcement to Israel to basically teach them how to racially profile, which is bizarre, right? So there is clearly a lot of anti-Semitism on the left. We do a lot of work on campuses. We have a program called Words to Action. We're going on campus and talking to Jewish students, pro-Israel students. How can you respond to a lot of the rhetoric that you're seeing? What are some of the strategies to use? And so forth. We do this program as well in college-bound seniors. So these are some of the things we're trying to prepare people for before these things happen. But we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing it in the political sphere. We've seen it from some of the newly elected representatives. And, you know, on one hand, we want to reach out to them and try to educate them as if we can. And at the same time, we need to, as an organization and as a community, speak out when these things are brought up and when we hear rhetoric that's problematic, and condemn it and tell people in clear terms why what they said was wrong. So the Ilhan Omar example I gave at the beginning, obviously ADL was one of many groups and people that were speaking out against what she was saying, and then she apologized, and then she said it again. So, I know that, there's the JCPA and the Jewish Federations and AJC and Stand With Us, and we're all kind of like, what's going on with some of these people. But obviously there's a lot of this rhetoric we're seeing. We're seeing some of the problematic activity from Antifa groups as well. And we have resources and reports on those people and a lot of these different groups on our website as well, if you're interested. So you can go online and look for up the different groups and individuals, and we have resources there.
We're all pretty grateful that you're monitoring the anti-Semitism that's coming out of the white supremacists, some of the other groups. There's a lot of anti-Semitism coming out of the radical Islamic imams in the mosques. And I've been to ADL meetings before, I've seen you before. I have seldom heard anything said about scrutiny of these imams, and we know that they're here in the United States, in many cities, and people seem to be fearful of talking about them. Can you answer that for me?
Okay. I am not fearful of talking about that. We have had several cases in the last few years where we have heard from really horrible anti-Semitic rhetoric from imams here in California, I think out in Riverside County, in Northern California, and so forth. And when we hear about these things, we of course speak out against them. We obviously, that's something we all need to do. At the same time, we are not embedded in these mosques. We don't have the capacity to send people and see what every imam is saying all the time. But we know that there are people in the community that hears these things, and we encourage folks, if you see something online, please let us know. We are looking at this, and we have investigative researchers who are focused on Islamist extremism, and we want to know about these things. So please, you can help us do our work by sharing things with us and letting us know when you do hear about these things.
I want to thank Matt Friedman for coming. We're going to transition now. You're going to stick around?
Sure.
Yeah, so Matt's going to be around. So please thank Matt for coming.
You have my email address and my phone number. If any of you want to reach out to me, you can.
And just so you know, if you can't see it from there, it's mfriedman@ADL, not AOL. Okay, that's a very different email address.
I still have an AOL account.
Oh, you do? Okay. But again, a round of applause for what ADL does, for helping keep us safe. So some of you may know that one of the incidents that was in the statistics for 2018 was actually right here at Aliyah, and we worked with ADL through that, and they were very helpful in working with kind of go between with law enforcement and what they recommended. So thank you for all of your help. Chaz, ready? I didn't do that. Nor did I. Okay.
Wie ahim soll ich gehen? Wer kann entfernen mich? Wie ahim soll ich gehen? Als verschlossen sedet ihr, sie ist der Welt groß genug. Nur für mir ist eng und klein, wie ein Blick nur zurück, siehst du schert jede Brief, wer hin soll ich gehen? Tell me where can I go? There's no place left for me. Where to go, where to go? every door is closed to me. To the left, to the right, it's the same in every land. Tell me, where can I go? And it's me who should know. Would you please understand? Now I know where to go, where my folks proudly stand. Let me go, let me go. In that lovely promised land, no more left, no more right. Lift your hand and see the light. I'm proud, can't you see? For at least I am free. No more wonder for me. Wie blikt moet zurück, siehst du steht jeder Brief, wie hin soll ich gehen?
We transition now from what's going on today, from the struggles we're having today, back to where we were 70 plus years ago. Just a few days ago, we were sitting at our Seder tables, we were singing songs, praising God, and we were told by the rabbis to tell the story to our children because of what God did for us on that day. We're told to tell the story in multiple ways. One of them is a journey from freedom, from slavery to freedom. The other, the rabbis tell us that the story begins with degradation and ends in exaltation and redemption. Tonight we come together to remember the degradation, to remember the tragedies suffered the Jewish people. And we do it with the memory of all those who are no longer here, the culture and the language that Chazan Stein invoked in his song of a time and place that by too many is already forgotten. And so we come tonight together to remember. We say Zachor. We say we remember. We say never again, and that's why we're so grateful to people like Matt who are doing the work so that we can ensure the future of the Jewish people. You'll notice that tonight there are 7 candles. We light 6 candles in memory of those we lost in the Holocaust, and tonight we'll light a 7th candle. We'll light a candle, both a yahrzeit candle, not a Holocaust memorial candle, but a yahrzeit candle for those who've been attacked this last year, those who were still in Avelut for, those for whom we're still mourning. And as we light that candle, we'll remember that we are to be the light, the Or LaGoyim, the light unto the nations. We are to answer the darkness with light. There's darkness all around us at times, and sometimes it seems like it's going to overwhelm us. Just as we're celebrating our freedom, as we're commemorating the crossing of the sea, we get alerts on our phones. But we know that we can drive that hate out. We know that we are not powerless. We know that we believe there can be a brighter future. To light the first candle, the candle of remembrance, I want to call up Serena Rubin and Rita Kane, sisters, survivors, members of the Aliyah community, and inspirations. light the second candle from Shomrei Torah, we call Murray and Ruth Huberman.
This is the candle of life. We vow to make the choice to live. As we remember the people who would make life a curse, so may we strive to make it a blessing. We choose life.
To light the third candle, we call Mike Schulklapper and Yossi Nisin.
The land of Israel, hope. With this candle, we give thanks for the land of Israel and for the message that the people of Israel live. May it stand for justice, may it stand for hope, may it stand for peace.
To light the fourth candle, we call on Paul and Georgina Einseidler.
Courage. This is the candle of courage. With this candle, we honor the memories of the courageous Jews who, against all odds, took action against those who sought to destroy them.
Amen. To light the fifth candle, Orly Talmore, her daughters.
This is the candle for the righteous Gentiles. We honor and respect all the courageous, righteous Gentiles who assumed responsibility to save even one Jewish life.
To light the sixth candle, we call Fran Gutman.
This is the final candle, the candle of faith. May we remain faithful both to the memory of our ancestors and to the commandments of our God. May we live up to the memories of the martyrs of the Holocaust and so many others in generations past who faced the darkness with the light of faith.
And now I'm going to call, that's the last candle for the in remembrance of the 6 million. And now I'm going to call my fellow clergy as we light the seventh candle, the candle for action. This is the candle of action. As there were those righteous Gentiles who acted so bravely and so selflessly to help others, may we so act to rescue souls everywhere and to sanctify God and live our very existence. Amen. Now the cameras.
There's a tradition that each week of the counting of the Omer, we attach a sphira, one of the emanations or attributes of God, connected to our mystical tradition. So this week, the sphira that is connected to the counting of the Omer is God's attribute of gvura. Gvura, which is usually translated as strength. It is not, though, seen as power and might, but rather the ability to have restraint, to hold back, and even to have courage in the face of difficult situations. The official name of Yom HaShoah is Yom HaZikaron L'Shoah U'Legvura, Remembrance Day of the Holocaust and Heroism. What is the nature of this gvura, this heroism, as it relates to the sphira of gvura? Perhaps this commemoration this evening and tomorrow suggest a time for holding silence, cultivating questions, and refraining from facile explanations. On Yom HaShoah, we choose to be with pain rather than to avoid it. My teacher once taught, we thaw our typical numbness and open ourselves to our collective heartbreak over the murder of the 6 million, as well as the other victims of the Nazi regime. Let me share his words again. We thaw our typical numbness and open ourselves to the collective heartbreak over the murder of the 6 million, as well as the other victims of the Nazi regime. And in our era of resurgent anti-Semitism and in the wake of the murders that we spoke about just a few moments ago in Poway and Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, our heartbreak this evening is even more accessible, more real, more intense. It was the Hasidic master Reb Nachman of Bratslav who taught that it is preferable to enter into the grief rather than avoiding or shutting out that which is painful. When people don't want to suffer a little, they end up suffering a lot. And so this evening and tomorrow, we gather to suffer. We gather to open up our hearts so that they may feel the brokenness that we feel, the pain of losing so many, and the implications of what that loss is for each of us individually, for all of us collectively, and for the world at large. Tonight is a time to feel. Tonight is a time to be at one with the pain and also to be silent, to hold back, to have the strength of gvura that allows us to experience the fullness of our pain. So may we enter the cracks in our hearts, and in feeling those cracks, may we be blessed also with the midah that we, and the sphira that we looked at last week, compassion and gentleness as we navigate that pain, and we hold on to those feelings as we hold on to each other as we rise for the El Malay Rachamim prayer, the memorial prayer for the 6 million beloved members of the Jewish people who were murdered senselessly in the Shoah.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. את נשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים וטוב, שנטבחו ושנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור יצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו ושלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר
Before we recite the Kaddish Yatom, I'd like to go around the room, starting over to my right, and if there are names or a name of an individual that you would like to remember who suffered during the Shoah, please mention that name before we recite Kaddish Yatom. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be a blessing. Together, let's recite Kaddish Yatom. Yitgadal Auschwitz, Yitkadash Lodz, Shemei Rabbah Honar. Ba'alma divrach yute babiyar, v'yamlich malchutei medanik, v'chayachon u'v'yomechon berkanau, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael kovno, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv yanauska, v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach leolam omei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach Theresienstadt, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam Buchenwald, v'yitnaseh v'yitadar Treblinka, v'yitale v'yitalal Vilna, Shmei dekudesha Bergen-Belsen, Barichu le'ela Malthausen, min kol berchata v'shirata Dachau, tushbechata v'nechemata Minsk, Damiran Be'alma, Warsaw, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. May their memories forever be a blessing to all of us as we say,
Amen. I'm going to ask you to stay standing. That's how brief I'm going to be. Just want to, in closing, when we say Yizkor on the holidays, the traditional words of the Yizkor are not just words of remembrance. In the Yizkor itself, and often in the traditional formation of El Malei Rachamim, it says their memory should be a blessing, and on behalf of their memory, I pledge to. So as we leave tonight, as important as it is to never forget, it's equally important to assure that it never happens again. And that's where we come in, to ensure that the memory of those whose names were mentioned tonight and those whose names weren't mentioned, that they're invoked, and that memory brings us to action to ensure never again.
Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia ufate mizrach kadima ayin litzion Sophia od lo avda tikvatenu hatikva bat shnot alpayim lihiotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion, Yerushalayim, Lihiotam Chovshi, Be'artzenu, Eretz Zion, Yerushalayim.
Thank you all for coming. Drive safely.
Some of them did. Some of them sat in the back. They were given the choice.
Have you ever been there before? No.
Thanks, buddy. Let's make sure to... Can you tell Rachel that she hasn't? Okay. Do you have any ideas? Like a theme? Yeah, like a theme. Last year we did homelessness. The year before that we did conflict. What if we did something less American political and more like on the theme, on Israel? Hi. Yes. Going up or going down? Well, going down, there's a sensor. Going up, there's a bell, but if you just honk your horn or flash your brights, the guard will see you and he'll open the gate. Yes. Okay. I like that. I like something. Just with all that, with Pittsburgh and Poway. Yeah.
Expect the unexpected.
I'm gonna run and bring, while you talk, my husband talks to you, I'm gonna run and drag my daughter over here.
She wants to.
Just so she can hear what you are already doing in here.
We haven't done anything.
I know.
I got back from Passover and I was talking to